Hi everybody, this is Carlos from Miami from Body, and today I want to talk about politics. It's the day after the election, and my Facebook is on fire with friends who are mourning the loss of uh, their favorite candidates, right? So Senator Nelson and Gillum, and those are my friends, right? And I see sort of these conversations going on Facebook that look pretty upsetting, right? And so I want to address that. I think I want to talk about that in part because I've been talking about politics with my writing students now for the last maybe like 4 weeks, actually from the beginning of the semester. And I often bring this topic up with them and they cringe because for most of my students, to talk about politics is very challenging. It often brings up a lot of fear that the other person whom they may disagree with may not like what they're saying and may shut them down and create arguments. So often the approach to dealing with politics is just to avoid it altogether. And I could really understand that. I do have certain people that I have a difficult time having a political conversation. But for the most part, I enjoy talking to people about politics because politics is really about life. It's about the choices that we make as a community. And so this little video is about how do we deal with the situation that we're in. The state of Florida kind of like split down the middle, even as the two major races that we were like heavily looking at, the governor's race and the senator's race, went to the Republicans. It was a pretty close margin for that win, and so we're looking at a community or a state that's pretty divided. And so, how do we deal with that division? How do we uh, work with our neighbors, and even how do we talk with our family? That's even more challenging sometimes when we hold very different political views. And I think, if you could bear with me, right? Like, I know that maybe that this is a turnoff for some of you watching, but it's important because the idea is that we don't live a good life on our own. We live our good life in connection to other people. We can't just go through this life isolated. So we have to deal with one another in order to get things done and to be happy and have safe environments and good environments for everybody to live. And so I've been thinking about some of the hot button issues for me, and one of those is immigration. And over the last couple of, I guess, weeks, we've been talking about it, but it wasn't until like a week ago that I realized why this topic is so critical to me. And it was by looking at an essay that I wrote about 15 years ago. And it was an essay I wrote about my dad and my family coming from Cuba. In that essay, there's three pictures. There's a picture of me when I was 3, which was a passport picture. There's a picture of me when I was 6, when we had just moved to Spain. And there's a picture of me when I was 7, when my sister and I had been placed in a boarding school because my mom had gotten really sick and my dad couldn't take care of us. So we have been separated from our families. And so as I looked at those pictures recently, I just had this emotional response of like, oh my God. And it dawned on me why, when I saw those pictures of those little kids being separated at the border from their family, that I had such a visceral reaction. And it was sort of me thinking about myself, right? And so that made me think that a lot of the reactions that we have, or a lot of our political sort of responses that we have, are not just merely ideological responses, but they're really emotional. And they're related to sort of past history and deep stories that frame the lives that we live, right? And so for me, that sort of immigration story, coming or leaving Cuba forcefully, and then being separated from my parents for a while, has marked or shaped the way I see things and I react to things. I'm aware of that. Um, and with that, I believe that everybody has those kind of stories. Whether you're on the right or on the left, everybody's coming to these issues most often from these heartfelt stories rather than just an intellectual basis. If we don't know that, or if we don't acknowledge that, or if we're not fully aware of that, we often then react to one another based on those stories, and the responses are often ones that we might not quite understand or even like. And so my point here is to remind myself, and also to invite you who are watching this, to go back in your history, go back to those sort of pivotal moments in your life that have shaped your heart, not so much your intellect, and how those stories and those events then frame how you see the world and how you see your politics, right? If we all do this, then we know that when we respond to one another, we need to come back into the heart and not just the mind. We need to tap into that which often triggers fear and anger, because there's something that's been taken from us, or something that we want that we didn't get, and that now we're seeing the other person, and we're sort of seeing them in that context or in that framework, right? And so maybe that opens up the political conversation to more of like a heartfelt conversation about the things that matter to us. Again, I say this because, without talking to one another, without really coming closer to one another and sharing the things that matter to us, we really can't have a fully satisfying life. Without community, a community to do that in, we can't really live a really satisfying life, or a safe life, or a good life. And ultimately, as the poet Auden would say, we need one another, right? We need one another or we will die, right? And during these times where there is so much division, it's critical that we come back to one another. And the way to come back is not necessarily merely through the intellect, but it's really through the heart. And the way to the heart is through the body, is through eating meals together, is through sharing moments together once again, and then becoming trusting enough where we could open up our sense of being with the other. Obviously, that doesn't happen in an instant, and there needs to be trust to be built. But if there is no desire to even build that trust, then we're really in bad shape. Thank you for listening, right? My hope is that as you listen to this reflection, you think about your own political stances. You think about how you hold back maybe from conversations. And that when you do, and I do as well, you might think, what's going on in my heart? What am I fearing right now? Why do I feel that I'm being attacked? And in that fear, am I projecting that out to the other person, where then they react to us because they feel that they're being attacked? Anyway, I hope this is useful. Join us for yoga this week, right? So I teach on Monday and Thursday. Yoga is this beautiful practice that really has to do with union, right? That's the meaning of the word yoga. And it comes to that sort of the basis of that yoga is movement and breath, right? So it's not so much thinking or thought or intellect, that there's a part of that, but ultimately we move the body, we breathe, and we sense, and we release judgment as much as we can. It is a practice, and the reason that we call it a practice is because we suddenly are in the midst of balancing ourselves, and we see that we have that, and then a second later we are snapping at somebody, right? And so we know that, and we're humble about it. We come right back to the mat and we try it again 1,000 times if we need to, right? Anyway, you take really good care, and I look forward to seeing you. Bye.